Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a wonderful and fabulous webinar we're about to put on. But I wanted to introduce Isaac Norton, who's our VP of Strategic Marketing. We worked together in a previous company in a previous life, so doing this is going to be fun. Never done it before. In our past 10 years, you've been in this industry, but today should be a good time. Just to give you a little bit of background on Isaac, he's been in the industry in the annuity marketing side of it for over 10 years, led multiple research projects for North America, including the Empowered, which was a women's view on retirement and what to expect from your financial professional. Also took a deep dive into our sandwich generations. So this is an old hat for Isaac doing these type of presentations and gathering this type of information. A little bit of information on me. Mike Dickerson. I'm the National Sales Manager here at North American. Been here almost 3 years now. Been in the industry almost 22 years. Like I said, Isaac and I worked at some previous companies together, and we've watched this industry grow and change, and we have some knowledge we want to share with you guys today. As I said, you guys are in a listen-only mode today. We will be recording this. We do have a couple white papers. We'll get to that on how you can capture that information, and so stay tuned. But right now, I'll turn it over to Isaac to get us kicked off. Isaac.
All right, thanks, Mike. Yeah, so what I hope is that many of you have already seen some of our starter Project Apex content. For those that haven't, Project Apex is our, what I believe, and from our research, is the first ever formal research done on top fixed index annuity producers out there. And, you know, top is kind of a relative term, but typically we're looking at 3 million annually or above. And really it was around finding the insights and nuggets and business practices that these top producers are doing that maybe, you know, those below that level aren't doing, or maybe they're newer to the industry and they just want to know best practices of what some of these, you know, top of the top producers are doing in their business. And it's never complete doing a Project Apex without my coffee is for closers mug here, Mike. So I know this isn't officially a coffee talk episode, but this is my coffee is for closers mug. So I've got it ready to go. So Mike had mentioned we've done a couple white papers, and the white paper that we're doing this webinar on is in your handouts. You can download it. And really, the first webinar and white paper we did, it was all around business practices, business model type ideas and insights that we learned from our research. And our research was both qualitative and quantitative. So we did in-depth interviews. We did a mass survey as well. And so we wanted to learn that. You know, Mike, I get a little geeked out about this stuff today because maybe it's because I got a C in Psych 101 in college, but this is the stuff that really interests me, and that's really the mindset, the behaviors, the habits, the personality traits, really what's going on in the headspace of top producers, and that's what gets me excited about this content. I know when we talked, you and I talked about this content, there's some spaces of it that really interested you as well, and you kind of had a spin on it as well.
Yeah, you know, many of the people that are on this webinar today have been to many events. You know, some IMOs out there bring in one individual agent to get up there and talk about their mindset and what they're doing. And what Isaac's done here today is he's researched and talked to hundreds of agents and rolled this all up into one. So you not just hear one person. This is going to be from 100 different agents' point of view. And that's kind of what this Masterclass Mindset's all about, Isaac.
Yeah, so today, this is kind of you could say it's our agenda, but really what we're gonna look at, and this isn't us making this up, this is what they actually told us. You're gonna see actual quotes in this event. The white paper has even more of those in there, but we wanna pull real stories out of this to help crystallize the insights we found out of it. So a couple things we wanted to look at is the origin stories. So where did these top producers come from? Was it just a high school, college, became a financial professional and they've been it for forever? Or was it different? And I think what you'll see here in a little bit is that the origins of these top producers are all over the place. whether it's just a new career, what connections they had, whatever. We'll talk through those, but the variety is just pretty astounding. We're also going to talk about motivations. What motivates these top producers day in, day out? What motivated them to get into the business in the first place? Where has their sales career path gone, and what's their outlook for the future? And then one that's kind of interesting is, what are those key personality traits? What do they think is enabling them to be successful in this space? What enables them to be, that top end as far as a production level? And then one of the things that I really liked, and I wanted to make sure we added into our research, was first, what do you wish you knew then that you know now? I think we could all say there's a ton of those from a personal level, professional level, beyond. But also, what advice would you give to a younger producer, newer producer, maybe that agent that just is trying year after year, but just can't seem to quite elevate their business? It's doing well, but it's just not quite cracking through where they want to. So we'll talk about some of those things as well. But we're going to start with our origin stories here. Where did these folks begin? And Mike, I know this is, you've worked with agents. Again, you talked about our decade plus of working together at different places, and you've run across a lot of producers who come from a crazy variety of backgrounds.
Yeah, when I got in the industry, we were selling a big bonus of 10, 11, 12% on a 10-year chassis with a 3% minimum guarantee. Maybe many of us would hope we go back to that, but that's kind of, that was the late 90s, early 2000s when I got in there. Like I said, 10% bonus, 3% minimum guaranteed. At that time, people were just insurance licensed. So I think as things have gone along, we've seen these projections of agents go from insurance license, then they got securities license, and now you've kind of seen the modern era of today, Isaac, where these are RIAs, got their Series 65. So there's been this through the the last couple of decades, some changes for the agents and what things have looked like, from not only from a product standpoint, but from their education and their history and what they're bringing to clients at the end of the day.
Yeah, it does feel like the specialist era has really given way to more of a generalist, holistic financial professional. And even prior to getting into financial services, the industries were incredibly broad of where they even started before they got into fixed index annuities and this kind of insurance space. So one of the categories of where folks came from was this idea of connections and recruitment. And we see a few examples there. I mean, pretty interesting. We had an MD who, had been interacting with a lot of financial professionals, likely because they were fairly affluent, probably had a lot of assets. So there's a lot of financial professionals, prospecting and trying to get them as a client. Well, this MD learned from them and eventually took their own financial courses. And being an MD is probably no stranger to studying and digging into content. And found essentially a mentor or a partner relationship, began working with their own clients, and now they're in that upper echelon of producers out there. And then you see that second quote there, again, found a personal connection, someone who recruited them specifically, could have been from a mentor standpoint or just a agency model or what have you. But again, it was just personal connections like that drove a lot of folks in there. And Mike, I know connections is not a new thing in our industry by any stretch.
Yeah, I went to college with a guy who, I started my career in banking, worked for First Union Bank in the mortgage industry. He got out, was trying to figure out what he wanted to do, became a bartender, and then, was kind of worked his way up through there, owned part of a bar. And when I got in the insurance industry, he was asking me, lots of questions about that. And I introduced him into the insurance industry to an IMO who helped him get his business practice started. And now this guy, writes over $7 million a year in index annuity and became highly successful. And this is just from a connection that I had to somebody personally, but I've just watched over the last 20 years grow as an agent and be highly successful. And it's, it just feels wonderful to me to watch somebody that I brought into the industry personally grow and develop and like I said, become successful, Isaac. And that's just from a connection that I've had all the way back to my past in college.
Yeah, connections are one of the underlying stories that came out of this around people connections, career projections. The one thing that came out too was that, and we'll see in a little bit, but career jumps, one of the most, I guess, seamless jumps were teachers and educators. So they would jump into financial services, and because of their skill set of being able to educate, teach, not come off as a salesperson, but just as someone who is there to help and educate, has really made that bridge easy to get across into financial services. The next bucket of places where folks began was this idea of being altruistic, really thinking about the person first. And I think one of the unfortunate things that came out of the DOL era, which I know we all are kind of mentally ready to move on from that, is this idea that the agents are not operating in the best interest of their client. And what we saw in this research was the top producers, man, customers are first. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. They are doing this from an altruistic perspective. I love the words they use, like, I want to help educate people. I want to help people. I want to help them have a better situation in life. Especially if you want to look at, the year of 2020, which again, another year we're probably all ready to put on the shelf. I mean, what better time to be someone who's trying to help and to help navigate maybe some rocky waters. So really happy to see altruism really stood out, being a helper. The agents are not the heroes of the story, and they don't see themselves that way. They're the guide walking alongside their client who is the hero of their story. And so that was really nice to see. And we'll actually see more of that here later on, that this idea of helping the customer, number one, is a big piece of their business. The next kit was around folks that maybe started, doing some insurance services as a hobby, as maybe kind of a side hustle, and it became so profitable, lucrative, successful that they actually just went ahead and made it their full-time gig, and have really, their business has just expanded because of it. So I think the one that's kind of interesting, the top one, I think we see a lot, and Mike, you mentioned it a little bit, where someone maybe who's in investment banking or AUM or things like that, then bring on insurance services as a way to be more holistic as a producer. But what's interesting, if you look at that second one, selling prepaid legal, and then was a pastor, and it just like, what a career track. But the idea here is that they added insurance services as a way to enhance their overall value prop once they got into financial services. So kind of interesting that some of them did it kind of more as a hobby, way to sort of dip their toes. And then as it grew and their business grew, or if you kind of said like they brought the boat closer to the dock, and now they can just take one step out and make that their full-time gig. We mentioned kind of just a full-on career change. Career path, we talked about education was a big one. A couple others that were just obvious bridges were accounting and tax. Talk about an industry or an area that's very complex and difficult. But if you're able to be successful in accounting and tax from an educational standpoint, you can easily bridge that over to the financial services space. So we definitely saw that, especially if you think about retirees having to navigate our tax code, on what might be a fixed income for the last few decades of their life. Being someone who has accounting and tax background certainly would be a benefit for those customers. And then, Mike, you mentioned your story about the guy who was doing mortgages. I think we saw some of that. Again, that's someone who's probably good at interacting with customers. The second one here talks about engineering and then a mortgage. So we didn't really ever see any of them just say, I went to high school, then college, then I went into financial services. It feels like all of them came from different backgrounds, but the same core principles remained, which was customers first, altruistic. I'm just trying to help solve a problem for them or help better their life. And I know how to work with people.
I know one of your slides, Isaac, talked about the medical doctor. And I was literally 2 months ago having dinner with a friend, and he invited one of his friends to our table. And the guy, I struck up a conversation with him, and the guy was a plastic surgeon, and he was currently going to get his MBA and to get his Series 65 because he had such an interest in this industry and to helping people. Obviously, he helps people from being a plastic surgeon, but I just thought it was going to be kind of a crazy jump watching somebody that's a plastic surgeon, knowing, what they do and the kind of money that they make, that he could see a career path in helping people in the financial industry. And it was just amazing to sit there and talk to him. We probably spent an hour there. He was picking my mind about, the last 20 years of what I've seen. And, this guy will be highly successful, highly motivated, but just going to be an interesting story and an interesting case study to watch.
Yeah, it's a good callback to the first white paper we did in the first webinar we did, which is these top producers are very good at niche marketing. And I don't mean niche as in like small and no one knows who they are, but a very targeted group. So I'm guessing this MD you're talking about is probably going to do really good business with his current clients, because I'm guessing they're having conversations already about finances and their history and their retirement planning and things like that. And now this hopefully future producer is going to have a very natural market that they can work with, where they're not going to have this. I'm guessing that plastic surgeon is not going to be cold calling anyone. He's going to be able to work his current book. And again, that's what we saw in the first white paper, is very niche, targeted prospecting, finding like-minded individuals, a group that very well, and working with them. So yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Great point. He said he would not hardly have to make any cold calling because he already had this built-in audience to speak to. So it's a great point you bring up there. He felt very comfortable in having people to talk his knowledge to of what he's found out from becoming an MBA, getting a Series 65, and just learning about this industry, that he had a built-in clientele there already.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that person and what most of our other top producers said is, ultimately this is part motivation, but part also kind of the origin story for them, is that they wanted to control their own destiny and be independent. They didn't want to have 3 bosses telling them that they forgot cover sheets on their TPS reports. They wanted to own their business. They wanted to be the ones who dictated their time, even set their compensation, because as we know with independent agents, I mean, there's no cap on it. Your cap is when you stop working. And so a lot of these top producers said, I want to have control over my time, compensation, who I'm working with, how much I'm working, and what I can do there. So the flexibility, or maybe the inflexibility of what they had prior to the financial services area, was a deterrent, whereas the flexibility was a pretty big draw. So we talked about kind of where they came from. Let's look at their motivations. And again, number one thing that came out of what motivates you is helping people. So again, just another, kind of, I would say, shot across the bow to the whole, DOL push on best interest. These producers are working in the best interest of their client. They are trying to offer peace in a time of volatility. So you look at 2020 and what I would say our fixed index annuities have done for clients during some of the really, the hard parts of the volatility this year, and improve their life or even maintain their lifestyle, so that not all of their assets are, riding the roller coaster of the market, but they can actually maintain their current lifestyle, and then just making a difference in people's lives financially. So again, there was not a selfish ambition, but just I know I'm doing the right thing and I'm doing a good thing for the people I'm working with. And Mike, I know you've seen this kind of through the years, as you've talked to agents out in the field.
And Isaac, you've done many studies on agents and figured out, trying to figure out their behaviors. And one thing I've seen, from previous companies, like we said, that we worked with before, they've done lots of these studies, and it always comes back to these agents. Their number one thing that they want to do is help clients. And every study I've seen, these agents that are out there, they want to help their clients and do the best job that they can and set them up for success in the future. So that story still hasn't changed, Isaac. it still stays the same.
Yeah.
These guys want to help people.
Yep, it's amazing what never changes. As much as our industry has shifted, the idea of putting the customer first is probably never going to go out of style, and I hope it doesn't, because that's who we're here to serve. Even from a, from the carrier perspective, from you and I, ultimately the client is number one, and making sure they're settled and find value. And which kind of a segue, one of the other motivations is these top producers saw incredible value in the products that fit a need. So one, they saw the client need out there through whatever industry they worked in prior to the financial services, and then when they even got here, they saw a massive consumer need for the solutions we offer and through the products we offer. But the nice part is they saw a great complement in the products that are out there. So it wasn't like it was a unmet need that had no other solution. The solutions are out there, and they wanted to create the bridge of that. So, one is they want to educate people on the need for life insurance and, where fixed index annuities can fit. But then they also want to be that person who can bring the solution to the table and not just be kind of that, Debbie Downer of, hey, there's a need, and then walk away. They're here to help solve that problem. And so the nice part is they, in our case, find a highly rated carrier who can help provide those solutions and make that client conversation pretty darn seamless. We mentioned the flexibility from the compensation and just overall flexibility. I like that phrase, be my own boss. So again, a lot of these folks came from maybe companies or areas where they had a very specific schedule, specific compensation structure, things like that. They wanted to be independent. That's an entrepreneur mindset, business owner. They wanted to work on the business, not in the business. And the compensation side of there's no traditional cap on compensation. It's capped by how hard you want to work or how hard you don't want to work, and how long you want to work or how long you don't want to work. And so those were very, very motivating to these. Again, if you have an entrepreneur mindset, that you're only limited by the amount of hustle you're going to put into it. So not surprising to see, but this idea of being a business owner and having control over your own schedule, compensation, independence was a huge story that came out of here, end over end. It did not, almost across the board, everyone spoke to that being a big motivation. So one of the other areas we said is kind of letting them self-reflect a bit on, their business growth and where they're headed. And Mike, one of the data points, we didn't get a ton of data out of this mindset thing because it's a lot of qualitative stuff. There's not a ton of, percents and things we wanted to put on this. But we did ask how many of them still believe their career is growing, not necessarily their business, but their actual career. And I mean, over 9 out of 10 of them said, my career is still growing, my business is still growing, whereas only 64% of those under that 3 million annual FIA production threshold said that their career was growing, which, hey, that's still a good number. But I mean, you talk about a pretty consistent 92%, almost all of them said, the trajectory is up. I'm not settling. I'm not content. I'm still headed this way. Which also means growing themselves. They are very much educating themselves as they go. They don't actually ever stop. And Mike, you've probably talked a lot more with these top end producers more than I have, but they definitely seem like a group that does not have a off button. Like, they are hard charging pretty much all the time.
We've gone through some tough times the last 4 to 6 months in this country, and one thing I've seen from these top producing agents is they were still out there working, still out there trying to help their customers, help their clients. There were some guys who, maybe packed up shop and didn't jump in there. But, those guys who are the top producing agents, is, 92% you're talking about, those people were still out there figuring out a way to get in front of their clients, help their clients. And it was in a time and a need when these clients needed help. I mean, we're still in these scary times. We're not out of it yet. So it's very relevant to what you're showing right now, Isaac, on what's literally going on in this industry right now, and where these agents are really needed to stay in time.
Yeah, I'm going to guess that that 92% group did some level of business evolution during COVID and are now going to actually be on the positive side of it and are probably going to pick up the business that some of those folks who shut up shop are pushing away. They're just that good and they know how to do it. Which kind of brings us to, what does that personality look like? And you know, we actually ask them directly, what are the key personality traits that you have that have enabled you to be successful? And again, another kind of message back to any of the naysayers during the DOL era discussion was, you know, best interest being taken into account. The number one personality trait that came out was being ethical. So for those that aren't familiar with the word cloud that you see on your screen, the more times the word is used, the larger it is. So by far, the number one response from these top producers was being ethical in that. And there's a couple others in there. And Mike, I know you're going to speak to something that you know, kind of your oversight from this. But one thing I did want to call out is I didn't think of this one coming out as being, you know, in that top 10. But if you look on the left and you see calm showing up, and you want to talk about a year where it'd be really nice to have a calm financial professional in your corner, walking you through, navigating through these times. But I hadn't seen that one before when we've done kind of similar research, but just amazing that, you know, that, and we actually did this survey prior to the COVID mess. So none of that was really going on, but these top producers said, you have to be a steady hand for these clients. Because, you know, they may not know how to react to some of the, you know, volatility news and the amount of, you know, media pushing of if it bleeds, it leads. As the financial professional, you need to make sure you're the steady hand in here. But Mike, what did you take away when you saw this?
You know, the word ethical obviously is the biggest word on there. And it is literally, you know, something I've heard from agents for a long time. Those 3 of those 5 things I've seen over the past 20 years of, you know, what agents believe in and where they kind of rank themselves. And you would see it in many studies, probably some studies you've done in the past too, Isaac. You've seen some of these same catchwords. I just believe that that's our industry. You know, we want to be a very ethical industry. There's been lots of people taking pot shots at us and giving us some tough scrutiny through the years, but tried and true, you know, those 5 words will have, you know, remain the same. You know, they're always at least a top 10 out there of what these agents believe and where they're trying to lead their business practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what was interesting too, and if you get into the white paper and download it in the handouts there, kind of another shameless plug for that, we actually dug into these words a little bit to figure out what exactly they mean. And so caring specifically, that was all around, you know, forget the professional relationship. How are you at taking care of kind of the personal relationship with the client? So are you recognizing personal milestones for them? You know, kind of the cliche, the birthday, stuff like that. But what about just out of the blue thank you cards and thank you calls, empathizing with maybe a difficult time in your client's life? That caring goes beyond the professional relationship. The other one that stuck out was authentic. And I think, you know, we always tend to think of that as like being real and transparent. But one of the things that they talked about a lot here, Mike, was that they don't sugarcoat things for their clients. Like this is not a, you know, just really trying to not rock the boat or, you know, walking on eggshells or anything. They are very honest and sincere about what's going on. So, you know, if there's a rough patch in the relationship or, you know, they're walking through some of the market scenarios and things like that, they don't sugarcoat things. They are going to keep it pretty well, you know, to the nines, very specific and upfront, again, transparent. So that was really good to hear, because I think sometimes you think it's just, you know, hand holding along the way and just trying not to rock the boat, but they all said, we do not sugarcoat things for our clients. We're going to speak in layman's terms, but we're not just going to try to, you know, rose-colored glasses and call it all good.
Isaac, I think you would be like me. When you're going to get some bad news, you just want to hear it straight. You don't want it sugar-coated. Just give it to me, let me have it, and let me process it. And I think, you know, that's what agents are really good at doing out there is, you know, as the end client, you have to process some of this information. And if something gets sugar-coated, then maybe you're really missing the real point. So what they're doing is, point on.
Yeah, and I think most top producers know that it's going to backfire on you if you do try to sugarcoat it, or consumers are so numb now to any kind of overhype or oversell that it's just going to come off inauthentic, and it's not going to sound like a relationship thing versus a more authentic, kind of one-to-one connection that, hey, if they say this, they're speaking the truth. So one other area that was interesting is that we mentioned it a little bit, but this idea that top producers see themselves as an unfinished product. So they are never done learning, pursuing knowledge. This goes all the way from educational professional development. So if that's designations or MBA or sort of extended college, that type of thing. That also includes networking and community involvement. So they are very plugged into their communities and just very good at networking. And we've mentioned this on multiple webinars for different reasons, but that taking care of current clients and establishing a referral network. I mean, you talk about one of the unsung heroes of the COVID time was a well-run referral network, because that's where most of the producers told us they were finding their next clients during that social distance time was actually from their current clients. So Mike, I know you kind of saw this, and I know you've seen a lot of producers who are kind of looked at educating themselves, but what was your takeaway?
So I've known a producer for over 15 years now, and he does a client appreciation event every year to kind of go along with, taking care of your current clients. He would spend over $100,000 to 6 figures on this party. But what his one ask was for his clients, his current client base, to bring a friend. And that was his referral network. And this was literally done off one party per year. Like I said, he spent a truckload of money on this. But if you're spending money every month on seminars or whatever it might be, he literally did this once a year, through a big, huge party, would have some great entertainment there. But then he would gather all these names, and those were literally the database he would work for the year to, for establishing his referrals, and those would be his new clients. And that just is, he was over a $20 million producer every year too. This guy's just a machine, and literally what makes it so amazing, it was just literally off this one party, Isaac, and it's just, that was his referral network, and that's never going to change for him.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, we did a kind of a small research project with producers to see how the COVID time has impacted their business, and the number one response of, hey, how are you continuing to get new business, was referrals in my current book. I mean, they weren't cold calling people. They were finding people that already trust them and know that they can deliver, and then finding connections through those people. So wasn't surprising to see, but it's just, again, great affirmation to that. So this was the area that this last area here was the one that I was really interested in myself, just because I like that whole idea of what if I knew then what I know now, what would I do, and then what advice would I give. So there's a couple areas that we saw. One was just kind of a flat out, gosh, I wish I would have just started earlier. I think I heard this quote, last I checked, someday is not on the calendar. So if you're someone that says someday I'm going to do it, it means you never will do it. So a lot of these top producers are saying, I wish I would have just started earlier. And then getting a specialized degree or license. And again, that isn't stopping them. They're doing that now, but they are saying, I wish I would have done that earlier on in my career. And again, we talked about referrals, so setting up a referral system much, much earlier so that every new client you're getting just kind of, spins itself into more opportunities. And then a couple others, and Mike, I know the mentor one really spoke to you, but I'll run through this list and I'll let you jump back to there. But this idea of mentorship and finding a mentor was huge through all of this, and it's probably going to be our next piece of content that comes out of Project Apex. This is the idea of a mentorship relationship or program. But they also said, I wish I would have gone independent sooner. More networking, more relationship building. And then some of them did say, hey, what I learned through my past has helped me become what I am today, so I wouldn't change anything. And that's always a good perspective to take on it. But Mike, the mentor one jumped out to you. Do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, let me talk about the mentor. As I've seen agents who are ready to exit the industry, they want to, have a way to pass on their legacy, have somebody take over their book of business, whatever you want to may call it. And I think, as they get towards the end of their career, they might start a small agency where they can start mentoring a couple agents, maybe one or two, to help them take over that block of business. Maybe it is a friend, maybe it is a relative, but you kind of see this as people get later in the industry, they want to mentor somebody so they don't go down the same pitfalls that they had, and can help them get established way quicker and help them kind of take over their book of business so they can continue on their legacy of what they've built throughout all these years also. So I think the mentoring is a big part of what agents like to do out there, and is kind of their evolution step to passing on their legacy.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think it's probably not, I think it's underestimated how many of those top producers want to, leave a legacy and want to be a mentor, to mentees, and not just from a business succession, but even just, different market, different area. They want to, they're educators at heart, the good ones are. And so they want to help educate then that next generation of producers. So I think most would probably be surprised by the number of these top producers who want to be a mentor to others. The last one here. So this was kind of the final, what advice would you give? So if you as a top producer are sitting there and you need to give some feedback, or you want to give advice to that green or newer agent, or younger agent, or maybe just one who's kind of on that middle to lower tier, who is just working very hard but just having a hard time kind of cracking through the next level. And again, the white paper has this in more detail, but just a couple things they talked about. And back to that idea of altruism and being ethical, was remembering the client is always number one. So again, you are not the hero of this story, the client is. So make sure you take on your role as the guide in a serious way, to where you want the client to achieve success. It's all around them. Two is, we just talked about it, get a mentor. So find a mentor relationship that you can trust, someone who's going to speak truth to you and not just be a, yeah, that sounds great type thing, but someone who's going to challenge you. Be a constant student of your craft. So that's articles, podcasts. What was amazing was in this research, how many of these top producers will spend the first part of their morning just digging into new content from podcasts, Wall Street Journal, periodicals, things like that. And then the last one is pretty straightforward, but be persistent. Back to that idea that you want to be independent, you want to own your business, you want to work on the business, not in the business. You have got to be persistent, because if you're independent, by definition, it means you're on your own and you've got to drive it. So again, be persistent. Don't let the ups and downs of a normal business track throw you off. Really stick in there and keep that hustle going, just like you had at the beginning. Keep that going, because you're going to need that hustle even when you're a top producer. So Mike, before I kick it over to you to kind of wrap us up, I do have one ask of those on the call if they're interested. If you are a top producer and you believe you've got a great story to share, we are actually looking for some volunteers to help do a video interview with, and then potentially we'll look at creating a podcast out of it as well. So if you are interested, we have on this last slide here, as Mike wraps up, is the sales desk number. So please call that to get in touch with us, and they'll connect you with me. But we want to get more of these stories out there. The data is great, the surveys are great, the insights hopefully you heard today are great, but we want to grab some of those, very anecdotal, deep dive stories that we can share with the rest of the field. So Mike, I'll let you kind of talk around next steps here.
Yeah, I guess if I could, one of the things you talked about is agents looking back upon their history, what they would change. And I think if I look back upon my career, Isaac, I would have got into marketing with you. I think that's where I would have changed.
We'll take your time, Mike. It's never too late.
I enjoyed everything you gave to everybody today, Isaac. And one thing we could talk about is, call in. There's actually 2 white papers we have, not only today's, but there was one that Isaac had done 3 to 4 weeks ago also on this Project Apex. So call in and get both those. As you can see, the numbers listed here, the 866-322-7066. And I believe there's a place on this website, you said, Isaac, where they could download today's white paper also. But feel free to give us a call in and collect those. That's kind of my call to action today. Take the next step in this. As Isaac said too, if any of you guys out there are top producers, we would love to hear from you. We want to gain some more of your knowledge and hear from you guys. We also have a quick survey at the end of this. It's 4 questions. So if you'd stay on here after we wrap up here and take this quick survey. But we appreciate you guys jumping on this webinar today. We're just trying to bring added value to everybody that's out there, and hopefully this bring a little more value to you guys' life moving forward. So stay tuned for the quick survey.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.